Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So, this story came out today. Police arrest more people for marijuana use than for all violent crimes combined. Now, think about this. Think about the ridiculousness of this. A human being makes a decision to smoke a plant. That society that particular human being is in allows people to take all sorts of type of drugs, including alcohol. Alcohol kills people each year. There's a large number of people who die from alcohol poisoning each year, not to mention drunk driving and that type of stuff. The number of people who smoke marijuana and die is zero. The toxicity for marijuana, in order to hit the toxicity for marijuana, you would pretty much have to smoke your weight in marijuana, and yet marijuana is considered illegal. That's fucking amazing. The idea that you're going to put a human being in a cage for making a personal choice to smoke a plant is abysmal and sad. That is a failure of your society on multiple levels. It is a failure to put that policy and institute that policy in the first place. It is doubly so to not undo that policy when it is full well understood that that policy is wrong. Meaning, when you have a majority of the population that says pot should be legal, you shouldn't be putting people in prison in a cage for deciding to smoke pot. When the majority of the population says that, which the majority of the population does, when a quarter of the states have pot either medical or legal, or meaning recreational is legal, and you still have other states that are continuously putting people in prison for deciding to smoke a pot. Understand the ridiculousness of the situation where an alcoholic cop can pick somebody up, a stoner, and put that stoner in a prison cell and can be presided over by a judge that is also somewhat of a pill-popping alcoholic. Certainly this isn't right. Certainly this isn't right. Richard Nixon, under the Richard Nixon administration, I mentioned this before, where Nixon was concerned that blacks and hippies were going to join some kind of political force and some kind of political allegiance. And in order to disrupt that group, the war on drugs. We're going to have a war on drugs. We have a scourge of drugs. We have to get these people who are smoking pot, these hippies, are the problem with our particular society. And that's what Richard Nixon did. You could lock up stoners, you could lock up blacks, you could castigate them on the evening news every night. And there's this extra bonus benefit of eliminating the voting rights for the people who you put into that prison cell. A human being into a cage for smoking a plant. I'm trying to nail this down because I want to get across the ridiculousness of this. In Iran, I remember watching a video in Iran where one of the reporters told the guy, he says, you know, it's illegal to have earrings for men. It's illegal for men to have earrings. And the Iranian looked at this kind of like, understanding that this is absolutely absurd. Americans, we hear that and say, oh my God, that's absolutely absurd. You know what's also absurd? A human being smoking a plant and being put in prison for smoking that plant. That's what's absurd. This is a failure of the left. This is a complete and utter failure of the left. To this day, they are still locking people in prison cells over smoking plants. Police arrest more people for marijuana use than all violent crimes combined. Those people are going to have to get lawyers. You're going to wreck those people's lives. Some of those people are going to be convicted, particularly if they're people of color. They have 4 times more likely of a chance of getting locked up. Not to mention, do you really want your police force engaging in your community in this way, where it's breaking up homes and creating friction between individuals purely for the sake because those people decide they want to smoke a plant? For the Democrats, when Obama was in office, did Obama know that Richard Nixon started the drug war purely as this thing to lock up blacks and hippies? Did Obama read that document that came from the guy in the Richard Nixon administration himself? I'll put the document at the bottom so everybody can see it. Did he know that? And if you look at that document and you read that document and you understand that they're putting people in goddamn cages. They're putting people in cages. Now, if he understood that, if he understood that the pretext for that was purely for this kind of political hatchet job, this destruction of people, their homes, their lives, purely for politics, and you're the president, African American in the first place, meaning you have a higher likelihood of being locked up for pot, and a pot smoker yourself, a flamboyant pot smoker yourself, famous pot smoker, And you look at this, you're president, and you leave your term as president without actually doing anything about that particular issue. Now, yes, you say for the states that have legalized it, you're going to turn a blind eye. But you as president, again, had the capacity to change the scheduling of that drug, meaning that they wouldn't be putting people in prison for pot. These numbers are staggering. Let's take a look at this. This is an immense failure of the left. The left should be embarrassed by this. Or the faux left, the Democratic Party, should be embarrassed by this. You had 8 years, including 2 of those years, or including, one of those years where you had absolute power of the governmental apparatus. Supermajority in the Senate, a majority in the House. Not to mention the presidency. And I continuously hear, oh my God, the Republicans stopped him from everything that he did. He couldn't do anything. He was just so weak. He was just so weak. He was just the most powerful man in the world, but he was the weakest, most powerful man in the world. Fucking amazing. He could have did all of this on his own. On any given day in the United States, at least 137,000 people sit behind bars on simple drug possession charges, according to a report released Wednesday by the American Civil Liberties Union and Human Rights Watch. Nearly 2/3 of them are in local jails. The report said that most of these jailed inmates have not been convicted of any crime. They're sitting in a cell awaiting a day in court, an appearance that may be months or even years off because they can't afford to post bail. It's been 45 years since the war on drugs has been declared, and it hasn't been a success, lead author Tess Borden of Human Rights Watch said in an interview. Rates of drug use are not down. Drug dependency has not stopped. Every 25 seconds, we're arresting someone for drug use. Federal figures on drug arrests and drug use over the past 3 decades tell the story. Drug possession arrests skyrocketed from fewer than 200 arrests for every 100,000 people in 1979 to more than 500 in the mid-2000s. The drug possession rate has since fallen slightly, according to the FBI, hovering near 400 arrests for every 100,000 people. Defenders of the harsh penalties for drug possession say they're necessary to deter people from using drugs and to protect public health. But despite the tough on crime push that has led to the surge in arrests in recent decades, illicit drug use today is more common among Americans aged 12 and older than it was in the early 1980s. Federal figures show no correlation between drug possession arrests and the rates of drug use during that time. Understand what they're saying. Understand what they're saying. They've declared this war on drugs. And in no way is this war on drugs showing that there's a downward push in the amount of drug use. If anything, that drug use is going up. Not to mention, many of these people are poor, impoverished, and they're just sitting in a prison cell because they can't afford to pay bail. This is for either smoking a plant or doing some other substance that's specific to the individual themselves. If your state or your government doesn't rely on data to make the determinations of its policies, then what is it relying on? Ultimately, they've made this He-Man approach to drug laws. Now, I've made the point before that the marijuana drug laws, the drug war, purely had nothing to do with an actual war on drugs or necessity of a war on drugs. It had everything to do with political hatchet job from the Nixon administration. Now that you know this, meaning as the Democratic president, as the Democratic House, as the Democratic Senate, as Democratic senators and Democratic representatives, now that you know this, what you knew before, you had to know before, what's your policy? What's your policy? 137,000 people are sitting behind bars because they made a personal choice. The last president that was in office that could have did something about that, at least from the standpoint of marijuana and pot possessions. And you would think, since he himself was a flagrant pot smoker, that that would have been something that he himself would have been interested in doing. But no. But no. To this day, the last president has allowed 137,000 people to be sitting in prison over drug possession. Now, the percentage of that, I'm not sure the percentage of that that's pot. Now, personally, I think all drugs should be legal. If you're going to deal with those things from the medical standpoint. Don't put people in a cage for making your personal choice. Not to mention, you embolden this idea of black markets for that stuff. I mean, part of the reason that you have this kind of Mexican drug war that's going on at the border of Texas right now has to do with us. The United States uses a shitload of drugs. Part of that is because of the economic stresses that we have in our society. But it's kind of besides the point. We use so many drugs that we create a black market to satisfy that market, call it that way. And so being a moderate on this, at the very least, pot should be legal. Again, I think all drugs should be legal. But at the very least, it is a hard argument to make that you're going to say alcohol has prohibition. Alcohol is perfectly okay. But pot is dangerous. Pot is dangerous. Pot is immensely dangerous. We need to lock up stoners because stoners are the problem in our society. That is comically ridiculous. And this is overtly embarrassing that our country is putting people away for personal choice to smoke a goddamn plant. This is a failure of the last president, by the way. This is a failure of the last president. You can say it was a failure of the previous few presidents. I stress this more so on Obama because Obama himself was a pot smoker. Like this, he gets the bail on both counts. If Nixon is looking at this saying we want to lock up blacks and hippies, or blacks and lefties, and Obama is running as a Democrat, and the Democrat is supposed to be the left-leaning party in this country, I call it the faux left. He's black, and he was a hippie. Ding, 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 ding. And then you get into the office itself where you have the authority to actually do something about it. To actually say, look, I don't want us locking up people because those people make a choice to smoke a plant. If people can drink their liquor, then people should also be able to smoke their liquor. That's too much. That goes too far. He's too weak to pull that off. He's too weak to pull that off. He was only the president of the United States, but apparently he was the weakest, strongest man on the planet. It's fucking amazing. That's embarrassing. It's absolutely embarrassing. When these people are telling me that you should support Democrats and everything else, and people continuously ask the question of why? They're so weak. It is so incremental to say that when states have taken it upon themselves to pass legislation to say, okay, we're going to make this legal in our state. It is the least you can do. Incrementalism. To say, okay, we're not going to harass those states. And mind you, for a while, they were still harassing those states. But when it was clear that a Republican president was going to come behind him, and it was clear that that Republican president was not going to have the same tenor on a lot of these issues as he was going to have, or that he may have had, meaning Obama might have been okay with pot. He was just too much of a coward to actually go through and say, look, we're not going to continuously lock up stoners. Seeing that I myself was a stoner and I myself turned out okay. I don't necessarily think this is something we should be putting people in cages behind. And certainly not to the degree where there are more people in jail for pot than for all violent crimes combined. That's embarrassing. That's embarrassing. That's a failure of your society. That is an outright failure of your society. Pot should be legal. All drugs should be legal. I don't care if people want to take substances for themselves. If you want to deal with issues of substance abuse, you deal with the things that drive the behaviors of substance abuse, not make some just declaration that these things are illegal and people are going to be put in cages for these things. The only thing you're going to end up doing is creating a black market, which is essentially what has taken place. At the very least, if you want to be incremental about it, pot should have been a thing that was made illegal. The interesting part about this, however, is that because Jeff Sessions has made a determination to undo the tepid policy that Obama put in place to not harass states that have made the decision to make pot legal, because pot is against federal law, because he's undoing that tepid regulation, Republicans have been bitching about it. Shocked the shit out of me. Republicans have been complaining about this. And some of the reports have come out of, hey, is it possible that because of what Jeff Sessions is doing, meaning going after these pot industries, and now that these things are industries, these things are going to be billion-dollar industries in these states, that you could get Republicans to get behind creating legislation to make pot legal, either medical or at the very least protect those states that have legalized pot. That would be fucking amazing. That would be absolutely amazing. And mind you, long overdue. There is no situation that in the quote-unquote land of the free, home of the brave, that police arrest more people for pot than for all violent crimes. And you have to ask the question, any reasonable person needs to ask the question, do we want police running around the streets locking up stoners? Is that a good use of the time of the police in our country? I'll leave it at that. I don't want to rant. I don't want to bitch. This annoys the shit out of me for obvious reasons, but it also annoys me from the standpoint of just freedom. Leave people to their devices. Leave them to their devices. I will leave it at that. Alright guys, if you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support through Patreon. Thanks guys.